Awesome. Glad you're doing well, James. Good to see you, CJ. Why don't you guys go ahead and throw a yes in the chat, assuming to let me know that you can hear me. And that would be great. I'm just managing all of my windows here, and we're going to get started with the No-B.S way to lead remote teams that win here in just a minute. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Throw a yes in the chat if you decided to put on pants today. I know that might be a little personal, but I think that counts, CJ. I think that counts. I do believe that shorts count. I don't know. I always was hearing from people like, oh, well, this is the first time I put on pants in a week. And I'm like, what are you doing all the time? Like, I've got a dog I've got to take out. I've got responsibilities and crap. Like, it seemed like a nice luxury. So awesome. Also, and I think both of you guys right now are from Austin, but please put in the chat, hi from wherever you're at. Hi from Austin, hi from Dallas, hi from Transylvania, and hi from Mars, wherever. Want to get to know everybody a little bit better as we go through this. And, I really want this to be as interactive as possible. Great. Well, we've given people 3 minutes, 3 whole minutes to chime in and to get settled and everything like that. And so we're going to go ahead and get started because I do have a ton that I want us to be able to cover today. So welcome, with that said, welcome to the No-B.S way to lead remote teams that win. And if you're watching this on Facebook, I'm not currently monitoring the Facebook comments because I got a lot going on here. We're in the online first summit Zoom, but I'll be sure to check out your comments whenever I get a chance. So shoot me a yes if you can see my screen. Give me a yes in the comments. James from St. Louis. My brother lives near St. Louis. Awesome. Great. So this is the No-B.S way to lead remote teams that win. And why, you might be wondering, am I calling it that? Why is the session called the No-B.S way? Well, primarily because when you get to know me, you soon start to realize that one of my central defining characteristics that kind of manifests both as strength and flaw is that I don't mince words. I don't dance around issues. Even my own mother describes me as being honest to a fault. So I'm not going to BS you. But the other more important reason that this is the No-B.S way to lead remote teams that win is because in our time today, we're not going to just talk about theoretical or high-level concepts or things you might try to implement in totally perfect conditions, because, well, conditions are never perfect, especially not now. And I know that you guys who are watching this, being entrepreneurs, business owners, business leaders, I know that you can't wait for the perfect conditions. You can't wait for things to be perfect. You can't wait forever. So we're not going to talk about high-level theoretical concepts. What we are going to talk about are real problems and the real practices that I've learned and used and actually implemented working in my career as a leader and now as a business owner. And now I'm fortunate enough these days to show others how to use them. So if that sounds good to you, open that chat window and throw me a yes in the chat. And then we're going to dive into right away, why are we here? And I bet you didn't think we're going to get all existential this early on. But no, I don't mean why are we here on Earth. I mean, why are we here today? And I think I have a sense of why you're here. Based on your interest in this topic, I'm guessing that you're here because you have a team of people of some sort. And I'd imagine that you're also probably a little bit like me in that you really like to win. I'm a pretty competitive person. And maybe because of COVID, maybe you're not winning right now. Or maybe you're not winning the way you were before as much you were before. Maybe getting those wins feels a little bit harder. Maybe getting people motivated and keeping people motivated feels harder. Or maybe you actually are still winning, but you feel in your gut or in your heart or in your soul that you could be winning more. You could be winning bigger more often, and you want all of that. And I'm guessing if you're here and if you're anything like me, you want wins not just for you, but you want to win for other people too. Whether that's for your customers, your investors, your team members. And so I'm guessing that's at least a part of why you're here. Maybe? Am I on the right track? If any of that sounds like you, give me a yes in the chat. But why am I here? Why are you here with me, the quote unquote expert? I'm here and I'm fortunate enough to be here thanks to the whole team at the Online First Summit. And I'm here talking with you today because I honestly never expected to be in charge of people, to have to lead people. I honestly was perfectly content writing code, starting back from when I first taught myself how to code when I was 12 years old. And that was, by the way, back in 1994, back before it was cool to do that. And I started coding at the age of 12, and I had odd jobs, all through middle school, high school, and college. I had coding jobs. And then early on after college, I started my full-time career and I became a full-time programmer, as I like to call myself. And it was interesting because as I started my full-time career, I was already kind of senior to some of the other people on my team. They might have been older than me, but I had many years of experience. And it didn't take long before I got tasked with being the lead engineer or the team lead on various projects. And I can tell you from day one, I sucked at leadership. I mean, I sucked on ice, but I liked the challenge. This was one of the first times in my young career where something didn't come kind of naturally to me. And I liked the challenge. So I did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading. I studied the people who are good at these things. And I started to get better at leading that first team. And then I got good at leading a totally different team and then leading multiple teams at once. And then I got asked to take on people management responsibilities at some point. So now I'm leading people in their careers. And then I had the opportunity as an executive to grow and scale an engineering department from 20 people to 50 people, and from 50 people to 100. And even at one point, leading 12 teams of software professionals all through their execution at the same time, developing the leaders on their team, improving those leaders on each one of those teams. And by this point in my career, it's been 26 years since I first started coding. Honestly, the whole idea of leadership and effective leadership and high performing teams is really completely consumed me. And now I'm kind of at the point where I just start to naturally see the patterns, the systems, the laws, the rules, the principles, the best practices of how to make a team go, how to make them work well and to win. And that doesn't just apply to engineering teams. The things that I've learned, the practices, the patterns, the principles apply to any team of people. And helping teams win and be successful and seeing people have success in their careers, well, that just makes me come alive. And it's actually the reason I get out of bed in the morning. And I know I'm a weirdo. Sometimes I feel kind of like a movie character, like a robot that learned how to care. And it is my absolute passion. So here's what we're going to cover today, in case you were curious. I'll start off by saying what we're not going to cover. As I mentioned, we're not going to cover theory or high-level concepts that sound great on paper, but only work in ideal, perfect conditions. I'm not going to give you some magic formula that will solve all of your problems. And lastly, I'm not going to share any nifty tools to help you remotely micromanage the shit out of all of your people until they hate your guts. The command and control approach is just an outdated and inefficient way to try to win. And I'm not going to show you how to do that. So if you're looking for any of those things, then maybe this is not the session for you. But as we are covering all of this ground today, and like I said, we're going to cover a ton of ground in a very short time. Before I get into exactly what we're going to cover, I'd like you to be thinking about this one question. What would having a winning team do for you and your business? What things would it change for you? And I specifically chose this question because I don't want you to just listen to me today, read a little bit of text on these slides, and then move along with your day, not applying anything. I want you to understand that it is possible to have kick-ass remote teams. And I can tell you this because I have turned around underperforming teams. I've turned around dysfunctional teams, toxic teams. I've helped good teams become great and great teams become outstanding. I've seen it happen, and it is possible. And I can't stress strongly enough how important it is to your success and your business's success to have winning teams. And I want you to believe that and to know how incredibly close you probably are to that already. So as the title of the session indicated, what we're going to cover is the no BS way to lead remote teams that win. And by now you're probably like, okay, what is that? And well, really the only way to do this is for you to become a remote leader that wins, to become the remote leader I know you can be. And after hearing that, you might be thinking, shit, I gotta work, I gotta do things. You can just give me some tips. But I want to reassure you that becoming a remote leader who is winning is actually easier than you think. And in reality, the way that I see it, there are just two parts to it. And the first part, we're going to get super familiar with what I call the 4 superpowers of successful leaders. In case you couldn't tell by now, I am a lifelong comic nerd. And we're going to go over those 4 superpowers, and then you're going to see where you can put those superpowers into action and really embody them as we cover the 4 pillars of high performance. And in case you couldn't tell, I keep asking you to join in on the chat. In case you couldn't tell, I really want today to be interactive, and I'm here today 100% to serve you. And so as we're going through today's training, if a question pops in your mind, please put it in the Q&A or in the chat. And by the time we get done, I'm trying to set aside some time and make sure we have time at the end to talk about and answer some questions. So make sure that you're doing that as those questions come to you. So if I asked you, what are the traits of a good leader? A number of words may come to mind. And honestly, I believe if I asked 10 people what the traits are of a good leader, I'd probably get 11 different answers. And you could point to a lot of different strengths and character traits that are commonly embodied by great leaders. And there's a lot of debate about what a leader has to have and what a leader can develop or needs to develop. And without discounting any of those traits, what I've found and what I've observed over my time are 4 superpowers that are key to overcoming adversity and thriving through challenging times, just like we're in right now. And so let's go a little bit deeper into those 4 superpowers. So remote teams and their leaders need to be creative. And I don't mean necessarily artistically creative. Think more like creative problem solving, having a free exchange of ideas, building on each other's ideas additively rather than shooting them down. They need to be resourceful as a leader, as a team. And this is closely aligned with creativity. You know, a lot of people think that they can't do things because they are missing some resources. But the best leaders and the best teams aren't the ones who have all the resources. They're the ones who make the most out of what it is that they do have. Third superpower, you have to be decisive. You know, if there's one downside potentially to having high levels of creativity and resourcefulness in any team and any leader, is that sometimes that can leave you with a ton of options. And you can't allow yourself or your teams to get stuck in analysis paralysis. You need to be able to gather what information you need to, use your judgment on when you have enough information, and make an informed decision, commit to it, and move forward. And then that last superpower, you need to be resilient. And we're definitely going to dive deeper into this one a lot more later. But in case you haven't noticed right now, adversity isn't picky. It tends to find everyone in some form or fashion eventually. And I will tell you that in all the teams that I've ever coached, led, been a member of, any team that goes through major adversity together and survives it together comes out way, way stronger on the other side every single time without fail. So here's some good news. None of these 4 superpowers come from being bitten by a radioactive spider or super soldier serum or being exposed to gamma radiation. All 4 of these can be discovered, developed, and strengthened. And you only need to embrace them in yourself and then recognize people on your team whenever they're exhibiting these superpowers, and you'll get more of that behavior. And I'm rapidly kind of telling you about all of these 4 superpowers up front for a good reason, because we're right about to jump into the 4 pillars of high performance. And I would really like for you to be thinking about the different ways where each of these superpowers can come into play. Because just saying you're creative or decisive or resourceful or resilient, just feeling like you are, none of that matters if your behavior doesn't match that belief when and where it counts. And where it counts is in the 4 pillars of high performance. So what are the 4 pillars of high performance? If you let me grab one drink of water, we'll get right into it. Pillar number 1 is clarity. Specifically, clarity in 3 key areas of your business. The first one is clarity across your team in your objectives or your goals. Those words, concepts could be used interchangeably. I mean, this is table stakes. This is the absolute minimum thing that you need everyone to know, everyone to understand, everyone to be able to repeat back to you. They need to know what the company goals are. They need to know what your department goals are if you have those, and they need to understand how their work contributes towards those goals. The second area that you need clarity is in your key results or your metrics. The way that you determine if you won or not. I'll tell you a little secret that's not really a secret. People want to win. People who love their jobs want to win. People who just kind of like their jobs want to win. Even someone who hates her job still likes to win. And these key results in the metrics, they are the way that you communicate to people whether or not they're winning. I mean, if you think about winning in terms of sports, for example, in team sports, how do you know you've won? In most team sports, it's when you have more points than the opponent. And it's important to know in business how you win, not just so you know when you won, but you also know when you've lost or when you're losing, so that you can analyze that and get better, just like in sports. And so it's super important to recognize that picking the right key results and the right metrics is difficult. You know, I'll give you an oversimplified example. People tend to think that picking the right goals or the right objectives is the hardest thing, but picking the right results to look for and move towards is 10 times harder. An oversimplified example, let's say you have an inside sales team and you decide not to give the key results their proper attention. And you might advise your salespeople that they should shoot to make 60 calls per day. And maybe that is a decent number of calls to have to make per day. But if you make that the key metric or the key result that they're pushing towards, then they might make a bunch of calls, but isn't it more important how many sales they close, how many leads they warm up or convert? And I am oversimplifying that a little bit, but I hope that you kind of see my point. So the third area where you need absolute clarity is what I call the stakes of their work. What do I mean by that? Well, similarly to the objectives or the goals, the stakes are the impact of the importance of the work that they're doing, but internally, in relation to the other work going on inside the organization. So questions like, how are other people dependent on the output of their work? What are those interactions? Is the output of their work, is it urgently needed by somebody else? How urgently? When they're handing off that work, what does that exchange or that handoff look like? And likewise, who or what are they dependent on to do their work, to hit those key results, to achieve everyone's objectives? You know, one thing that I see that it drives me crazy and it kills productivity over and over and over again is shitty collaboration due to shitty preparation and shitty communication. Let's say you've got 2 people, person A, person B. And person A is going to need some of person B's time and effort. And they know for a while that they're going to need some of person B's time and effort. And then they just wait until the last minute to tell person B, hey, I need this thing from you. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And they tell them like right at the end. And now person B has to stop what they're doing, go handle this other request, and because it's suddenly urgent. And that's only really a fun way to operate if you like the idea of nobody being able to allocate their time or predict how long it's going to take to do anything. So clarity in these areas is super, super important. Pillar number 2 is focus. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that most everybody who's watching this talk is part of a smaller business. And In small businesses, people tend to wear a lot of hats. It's a must. And so a lot of your team members are going to have multiple things on their plate. But you need to be able to help them understand which thing is their number one priority. I'll give you another example. Let's say you've got a team of account managers, or you've got an account manager who handles all the relationships with your existing clients. They need to understand, if they've got a bunch of clients, which clients should be getting more attention from them and are the priority versus your other clients. And to take it a step further, if they can understand why those people need more of their attention and are their priority, then they can start to manage their priorities themselves, and you don't have to be directing them all over the place. And the other reason focusing and understanding your top priority is so important is because distractions will happen. Right now, everybody is not working from home. They're at home working, along with everything else in their home that's a distraction: your Netflix, their kids' school, their spouse who also has meetings and things going on. Their entire household is at home. So distractions are just going to pop up. It's going to happen, even in non-remote times. But I'm asking you, begging you, pleading you, whatever, do not be the cause of distractions. You know, the metaphor I think of in my head about managers and leaders distracting people from their top priority is like, if you're a football coach and your star running back is breaking a bunch of tackles, running down the sideline, and he's only got a few men to beat, the distractions, and then you run out on the field and you tackle him. Like, don't be the cause of distractions. And going further than that, I always like to say that I like to eliminate avoidable distractions. What are the things that shouldn't be distractions that we can just get rid of? You know, one of the first things I always do with any organization, and this is especially true with like creative work, like software engineering or things like that, is I like to make all work in progress extremely visible. You've probably heard of agile boards or task boards or Kanban boards, but by making all work visible, it's harder for other little things, distractions, to hide in the shadows. Those little side requests from the CEO, the personal favors, the pet projects that come in through email. And maybe you can't eliminate all distractions, but you could definitely eliminate avoidable distractions. Because what happens is distractions become disruptions. And the difference is, if I look out my home office window here and I see a cute dog walking by, a distraction is a cute dog. A disruption is I go outside and play with the dog for 35 minutes. So if distractions are starting to become disruptions, you want to kill those when they're small. You know, if it was a dragon, you slay the dragon when it's a baby, not whenever it gets big enough to torch the entire village. And all of this is easier when you have absolute clarity on your objectives, your key results, the stakes of what's going on and what people are working on, because then that lets those things guide people's decisions around priority and focus. And you don't have to make those decisions for them. And inevitably, priorities may change. It's bound to happen sometimes, especially during uncertain times like this, and that is okay. But it's helpful to gain explicit understanding and alignment with all of your people when priorities do change, and not just assume that they're going to get it. It's important to be intentional about changing your priorities and explicitly communicating to people when the priorities change. And then remember, the communication is a two-way street, and make sure that they really understand and they're not just nodding their head. So that's focus. Pillar number 3 is all about motivation. Specifically, how people's motivations differ. Hold on one second. If my puppy didn't want to chew on his toy right next to me, I feel like it wouldn't be normal. So, talking about motivation, as a business owner or leader, the top things that motivate you to perform well are usually going to be more closely tied to the success of the business, right? So the closer to the top of the organization you get, the more true this is, where you want to perform well so the business performs well, and that's what's motivating you. But the further from the top of the organization you get, the less likely this is to be the case. And I hope you understand that doesn't mean that your people don't care because they're not motivated by the same things you are. At the very least, they're going to care because, you know, the company needs to be successful to be in existence and for them to have a job. But the further away from the C-suite you get, the more likely you're going to find that people have other primary motivators. whether that's providing for their family, growing in their career, gaining new skills. And it's super important to keep this in mind and to really understand and get clarity on what people's primary motivations are. And why is it important? Well, another metaphor for you. If you're on a farm and you've got a bunch of horses and you're trying to get a horse into the barn and put into the stable, you could take the approach of standing behind the horse and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, maybe getting a little bit of momentum and constantly looking out around to see if you're going in the right direction. Or you could take the reins and feed the horse some carrots and then just casually guide the horse into a stable where there's all the comforts of home and food and all the things that motivates that horse. And one of the primary points of being a leader is to be able to influence people and influence all of your people to help you all accomplish things that you cannot possibly accomplish on your own. And this is where the magic really, really happens, is when your entire team, all with individual unique motivations, come together to help the company hit company goals for their own individual reasons and motivations. It's impossible to try to project your motivations that you have onto a team member and expect her to embrace them with the same passion and dedication and vigor that you have. So you need to understand theirs. One of my favorite quotes around influence, talking about influence is the idea of selling ideas, plans, and vision, is that you cannot create desire in someone. You can only channel desire that already exists. I'm a little behind on my slides there. That's what happens whenever you get passionate about a topic. The fourth and final pillar, we're making really good time. It's all about execution. Because all the goal setting and the planning in the world is kind of useless without focused execution by your team. And by the way, this is the pillar where every one of those superpowers shows up in spades, especially resilience. And you need to keep in mind that as a leader, it's no longer your primary responsibility to be executing on those day-to-day tasks that are now the responsibility of your team. Your duty is to ensure that the objectives are clear, that the metrics and the timelines and the key results have been well thought out and communicated, that people know their priorities. And then as they're executing, you make yourself available to them as a guide to check in on how they're progressing towards the goal, not as a micromanager, but to see if you can be helpful, to figure out what's working and encourage more of that, to figure out what's not working and decide whether they should stop doing it or whether there's a problem in there that's worth solving. And then to identify and eliminate major impediments and roadblocks that they're encountering that they can't navigate through on their own. I mean, this is really, really super critical. And I hope that you understand that high-performing teams have absolute clarity and understanding on the objectives that they're moving towards. And they operate mostly autonomously. And they shouldn't need you to hold their hand, but they might need the additional information that you have on objectives, key results. They might need you to help them get rid of a roadblock that's in their way. Because here's the thing about your goals and your plan. No plan survives contact with the enemy. You can plan everything out all you want. Reality has different plans. And inside that truth that all of your planning won't survive contact with reality is another hidden superpower that actually will bring you some joy, some peace, and some zen. And that's when you accept that you can't plan everything out. And you accept that sometimes things will go wrong. And once you can accept that, then you kind of start to expect that sometimes things will go wrong. And then as you start to see things that are going a little bit off the rails and maybe happening more than once, you can start to anticipate that certain things may go wrong. And when you can do that, you end up better prepared for those things. And you can address important issues now that you've expected them and you anticipate them. You can address these things in a more calm, measured, and focused manner, which will be really reassuring for your team as well and will help them to be more resilient. And when you're doing that, you're actually guiding your organization and your teams, and you're not just putting out fires constantly. I spent years doing that before it really clicked with me on leadership. And by the way, I love this picture, partially because it's a dog surfing, but one of my favorite agile software engineering books, Practices of an Agile Developer, they talk about how most people think of software, building software as going down a road, and how it's really more like surfing, and how you're just kind of dealing with every little wave and everything that comes up. And the reason I bring that up is because what I've noticed is that that is exactly how business is too. You don't just set a plan and run straight towards the plan. No, you have to deal with all the ebbs and flows, and you have to be able to handle the waves. So let's review real quick. We've got our 4 superpowers of successful leaders and teams. That's to be creative, be resourceful, be decisive, be resilient. I love this quote too. And I just found this quote like literally in the last 24 hours. And then we've got those 4 superpowers that you're going to exhibit, you're going to use in your behavior across the 4 pillars of high performance. Clarity around your objectives and your goals, clarity in your key results and your metrics, clarity in the stakes of your people's work, focus on their number 1 priority. Make sure that you're eliminating the avoidable distractions and not being the cause of distractions. And then if priorities do have to change, be explicit about it so there's no confusion. That goes back to clarity. And then motivation, understanding that everybody's motivations are going to be different, figuring out what really motivates all of your people, having those conversations, then you align their motivations towards your collective goals. And when you are able to do that and those collective wins through all those individual desires, it's like sacrificing nothing. Like everybody's winning, and it's like magic. And then last pillar of execution is to be a guide. Don't be doing the day-to-day tasks as much. Find out what's working, what's not working. Figure out what roadblocks are in their way, things you can get out of the way that they can't navigate on their own. And then accept things will go wrong, expect things will go wrong. And that third step, anticipate that things will go wrong, and you'll be able to handle these things a lot more easily. So that was the last of all of the knowledge bombs that I had to drop in this particular talk, but I do have one more gift for you guys today, and that is a leadership self-assessment that I put together so that you can determine where you're currently at with embodying the 4 superpowers of successful leaders and teams, as well as how strong you are across those 4 pillars of performance. And it's an embedded type form, a self-assessment right on my website. And if you follow this link, you will go to the assessment. And once you complete the assessment, you get your responses right in your inbox. So you can keep track of where you're at any given time. So with that said, I'd like to open up for questions. I see I've got one question in here from CJ. Let me get another drink of water real quick. I'm not really good at talking without a lot of water. So CJ asks, what is a common theme when you go in to turn teams around? What makes them insufficient to begin with? That's a great question. And honestly, the interesting thing is most of the time, the team is not insufficient, right? The team is well equipped. They just have some behavioral issues, and it's usually around collaboration with each other. I would say one of the very common things that I do run into is a problem in clarity from leadership. I feel like a lot of times a business owner or a department head or a team leader, they've got all this information in their head, all this context, and either they forget that other people don't have it, or they communicate at one time and they feel like everybody should get it. One of my biggest challenges growing as a leader, and to this day I still sometimes struggle with it, is in getting used to repeating myself. because just as with today's session, I've been talking for 36 minutes, and I would love for you guys to absorb everything that I said, but you're probably going to walk away with one or two things. So getting used to repeating yourself and making sure that people have a place to go to get the clarity. Maybe you've got a way to radiate information in your Google Drive or in the tooling that you use. Clarity is king is a saying for a reason. And so I would say that's one of the big issues I run into is lack of clarity from leadership. And then the other thing is honestly in more explicit communication, people not really communicating what it is that they need or why do they need it. And that can lead to a lot of tension and a lot of conflict. Great question. Anybody else have a question, thought, or comment? I'd love to address it. Awesome. That was like the 15-second rule. Well, I'm honored for you all who have joined me today, and I really appreciate you taking the time and spending your time with me. I know that we're all super busy, and I appreciate that you spent the time with all of us today. So until next time, hasta. Oh, got one more question. There it is, CJ. One more question. If you want to improve communication, but don't want to be overbearing, what tools do you recommend? CJ, how about let me see if I can bring you on here and we can maybe talk through this. I think it'd be really valuable. Not participants, there we go. All right, CJ, I just enabled your talking. What do you mean by being overbearing?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. So what do you mean by overbearing, CJ?
So you just mentioned earlier in the talk about not wanting to micromanage and things of that nature. So like, I mean, you're spot on with everything that you're talking about, and I've run into the same thing. And I love how you answered. It's more behavioral, and that's where like things like Slack and other tools, I tend to love them, but they're also people tend to over communicate at that point, and it becomes kind of overbearing from the top down, where people don't necessarily know like what the boundaries are. So I just wanted to know in your eyes, how do you improve communication, but you don't let it become kind of like a distraction in itself?
Right, no, absolutely. And Slack is a really good example. It's such an amazingly useful tool that can also become its own distraction. I have a bit of a philosophy around some of these tools, and I won't go too deeply into it, but I would say, tools like email and your internal wikis and Google Docs and things like that are very good for broadcasting and communicating decisions that have been made. And even to a degree, Slack is kind of that way. I believe things like Zoom, things like the remote calls, actual meetings are best intended for conversational things and decision making. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was looking for more of you answered it. I was looking for more of a framework to go about doing it, because again, like I'm similar to you. I work in the same space, and I've seen the same problems.
A really good framework is just the basic Agile or Scrum framework for people, and you can kind of play with it if you want to, and that's basically having a daily stand-up of some sort, and it could be a couple times a week. I've done them twice a week, 3 times a week, every day, depending, you kind of find the cadence that works for you. And just focusing in and making sure people are actually answering the primary questions from an Agile stand-up or a Scrum, which is, what did I accomplish yesterday? Accomplish, not like what did I work on, like what did I accomplish yesterday? What do I plan to accomplish today? what could prevent me from accomplishing that, right? That way you get people starting to talk about, okay, this thing's in my way, or this thing might be in my way, or I've got all these meetings. And having that regular cadence of check-in means that there's less unexpected communication that comes up. And that's where, I was talking about kind of waiting to the last minute to ask somebody for something or all these other things. When you have a regular cadence for these things, that means that there's a place to have those conversations. And if somebody's got something towards the end of the day today, for example, that they think might be a little bit urgent, or there's a problem and it can wait till tomorrow and tomorrow's stand up, then you can just push it until then, and you're not, distracting and disrupting people.
Love it. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So if there are no more questions, then I guess we're out. Thanks, everybody.